Hello, and welcome to the Chip Observer. Here we're going to look beyond the buzzwords and try to navigate the ins and outs of the semiconductor industry. In this space, we'll invite industry leaders, academics, and analysts to discuss how the semiconductor landscape is transforming itself, asking the questions, how does this affect me? Again, this is not just from the corporate perspective, but also for the everyday on-the-go individual. As always, this podcast is presented by Tech Insights, the definitive source for semiconductor analysis, with continued focus on growth and providing value to the industry. With that said, my name is Frank, and I hope we can navigate this landscape together and present something interesting and informative. Today's episode continues our review of generative AI, focusing on the driving factors in growth and user adoptions within your everyday on devices. That's from your smartphone to your smart house. Is it cost effective or is it just a gimmick? Is Gen AI something we'll all eventually want? And recently we had a chance to sit down with a few industry specialists here at Tech Insights in some of the on-device fields being disrupted by Gen AI. Eric Smith, Director of Connected Computing Devices, and Ken Hires, Director of Device Technologies. I invite you to listen to them explain, in their own words, how generative AI is changing the landscape. Welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. It's great to be here this morning. Welcome, everybody. So let's talk about AI, generative AI in particular. Obviously, it's been, the topic of 2024, and, it might be good to sort of figure out how we define AI. You cover smartphones, the mobile world, I cover PCs and tablets, so there may be some differences in definition. So, what does this look like in the smartphone segment?
Hey, Eric, I'm not sure that there's one of the things I think will probably be a theme for today's conversation is I don't think that the differences are going to be as big as one might expect between what AI is like on the mobile side versus the laptop PC side. But kind of thinking about definitions, and what is AI, I guess the first point I kind of want to make is that, we think of AI as something that's just happened in 2023 or 2024, but, it's a 2020s thing. It's the new thing. And it's been around for decades. Certainly the AI that most consumers are familiar with actually came about in the previous decade, and that's personal assistants like Siri and Alexa. Those are AIs. AI is basically an algorithm. It's just a bit of code at its most basic way. Just simply being more useful.
So what you're saying is there's a fundamental difference between existing or the old AI and this new generative version.
The old kind of AI, that powered Siri and Alexa and all of that, it's what we call discriminative AI. And, it plays by a set of rules. It is trained. It's a predictive model. It takes data and it makes predictions or decisions based on a classification or regression analysis.
So as an example, we're talking image generation.
A discriminative AI would look at a bunch of photographs and it could say, okay, here's a person, here's a dog, here's a flower. It's
right.
Really good. It might be able to say, this is Eric, this is Ken, that's a dog. The new AI, generative AI, it can create new data based on how it's trained on that old data. So it'd look at that batch of photographs and say, okay, here's Ken, here's Eric, here's a dog. Now let's go and combine all of these elements and create a new photograph. It would go and shift all the objects around. That's what is new. And I'm giving a really basic example, but
right.
I think that kind of is how you can think about the difference between different kind of AIs. And on the mobile side, what we do is we say, when we're thinking about AI smartphones, sometimes people get, they look at the numbers and they say, well, wait a second, there can't be that many AI smartphones. And we say, well, here's your discriminative AI smartphones. 100% of phones have a personal assistant, Siri, Google, Alexa, Baidu, whatever.
Right.
And then there's this small proportion that have these generative AI models running. So that's kind of it from the mobile perspective. I don't know. Like I said, I think it's probably somewhat similar on the PC side, but what do you think?
Eric, from a PC perspective, where do we stand with effects and standards that we're used to, and what's changing?
Yeah, that's, it's the same that we're looking at. I mean, there's stuff that we're used to as AI, screen, background blurring and studio effects that you have in your video, that it's that next step of, okay, what are the sort of tasks that your computer or your device, whatever, can offload from your daily regimen.
Right. So it's how we can leverage generative AI to lighten your own workload, creating or maybe editing new content and allowing you to focus your own human intuition and your own creativity and sort of remove the mechanical part of the creative cycle.
So, one thing that has really sort of kicked this off in the PC world has been the introduction of NPUs, neural processing units, right? You've got CPUs that handle, all of the basic operations, most of the operations of your PC, your GPU, which handles, graphics heavy stuff, ray tracing, that sort of thing, depending on how strong your GPU is. And then the NPU is sort of another level down of, efficient, very focused on matrix multiplication, all the tasks that happen for AI. So the way we look at the world of AI, particularly in PCs, to say it's got to have an NPU that offloads some of that. Those processes, doesn't bog your computer down, doesn't draw a bunch of energy to do that. And on top of that, it requires, a certain number of, certain level of performance, certain level of silicon there to back that up. So not only are you having that additional value add of the NPU on the SoC or the SiC, now you have RAM requirements because you're loading the large language model into the RAM to make it accessible very quickly. 16 gigabytes of RAM is what a lot of the OEMs are suggesting, or a lot of the ecosystem players are suggesting for this. 256 gigabytes of SSD storage, again, to sort of handle a lot of the content and other things that go along with this. That's variable depending on what kind of application you're talking about, but we are talking about a higher level of silicon content in these devices.
Right. With that said, it's fair to assume not only cost, but additional power needs and consumption for on-device use may be higher for phones than, say, a laptop.
Yeah. This has been a perennial question for mobile devices that, nobody wants their device getting too hot, and nobody wants their device not making it through the day. And I think that not making it through the day is kind of the answer to your question. If a phone can't make it through normal usage, then consumers are going to be upset. So
understandable.
Short answer: it's got to make it through 16 hours of normal use. And this is going to be a problem. I mean, the NPUs, the GPUs are getting more power efficient, but they're also doing more. I think one thing that helps is, devices are getting larger now. That means you can put a bigger battery in. That's going to help. I think, all day battery is the requirement.
Really?
Yeah, I think what has been really interesting about the semiconductor industry on the PC side in the last year has been this move toward efficiency. So, competition is great. It has really spurred some innovation. It isn't all about just brute force. Obviously, that still exists. There are some very, very brute force, powerful type of CPUs and GPUs out there. That's not to say that they don't exist, but what you're seeing now is, the last generation of Intel processors, core processors. There wasn't a huge jump in performance, but there was a massive jump in efficiency, power efficiency. And you see that in the current new generation of Intel processors, where Lunar Lake, I think, is the code name for that one. But, where did all this come from? Well, Qualcomm had been making noise about their ARM-based PCs coming out for years. They had been in the game for a decade, but using mostly mobile-based processors, and the performance just wasn't up to snuff, and emulation issues were not really there. But after acquiring Nuvia and being able to utilize some of those Orion cores in their X Elite.
So what you're saying is competition is what's spurring the innovation now.
Absolutely. Those ARM-based processors, one of the key selling points has not necessarily been AI. It's been all-day battery life.
Mm-hmm.
It's been the ability to leave your charger at home and take your laptop around. So not, that expectation of all-day battery life isn't there in the PC world. It's been the dream, and that dream is in reach, right? And so you see that competition, that innovation happening where everyone else is trying to get to that point as well. And NPUs are part of it, right? NPUs are what, kind of looping back to the question of, AI making this perhaps a problem, that NPU being able to offload processes from the CPU, from the GPU, onto this separate silicon that is intensely focused on matrix multiplication, and being able to handle that is a real game changer, because, my PC, it doesn't have an NPU. And when I have background blurring on, it's like a airplane engine next to me, because it's trying to cool down. That wouldn't be the case. It's not the case with an NPU. And you can see examples of Task Manager showing you where the resources are being drawn. And if it's on the NPU, it's incredibly efficient. And that's sort of the goal.
Yeah. I think that's there's a lot there. Taking it back to front, I think that when I think about smartphones, it's kind of curious that $800 is a high end, perhaps on a laptop. We think of a laptop as just being so much bigger, so much more capable than a smartphone. But one of these now is it starts at $1,000. The high end. When we think about what is going into a smartphone now, you've got a much smaller package, but you've got to go and put up a lot more. You've got to pack in a lot into that small package.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to play a bit of devil's advocate here and maybe pivot a little bit on this topic now. I mean, we've touched base on more hardware and higher power consumption and how competition is driving the industry, but that's more at the corporate level, kind of niche. Is it fair to ask, is this ever going to be customer centric? Is it just a gimmick, or is it something that the average end user will want to have access to? Where and when do we expect generative AI to become big enough a use case to drive this sort of device sale, growing it, looking for a possible super cycle in smartphone sales, becoming something useful for the average consumer?
Eric, do you want me to start, or do you want to take this one first?
I think I can just quickly pipe in and say, I think what's really interesting on the PC side is it is led by enterprise. AI usage is led by enterprise. It's not. Yes, AI is kind of a nice to have or kind of a toy in the consumer market, but when you look at the enterprise market, there's some incredibly powerful applications that are out there. It's all cloud-based right now, mostly cloud-based, and corporations are paying through the nose for them. But basically, how does that shift over? How can some of that be offloaded to on device? Are there privacy implications? Are there some new use case that is much more efficient, much more makes more sense to have on the PC versus in the cloud? And that's going to be sorted out in the next couple of years. But I think it's going to be that enterprise leading the way, and somebody at work saying, well, I'm able to do X, Y, and Z on my work computer. Why can't I do it on my home computer? And that's where if you look at our forecast for the PC market, you'll see obviously there's that regular refresh cycle that happens in the industry. But what we're saying right now is that there's a long tail of replacement possibility in the later forecast years, in the later part of this decade, because we do expect some of those killer use cases or those apps that people are using at work that will then, convince them that it's worth going out and buying one of these for their home use as well. So it's that two-step.
Right. Understandable.
That's kind of an interesting concept. Okay. I've done this at work. Why can't I do it at home? I'm not sure that really applies to the mobile space.
Yeah.
It'd almost be reverse in effect. Kind of thinking about the question, though, of when are we going to see a super cycle? This is the perennial question in mobile, not just for Gen AI. We saw it with 5G. We saw it with 4G. Okay, we've got this new capability, this new technology in the smartphone, the mobile devices. When is it going to drive a massive upgrade in sales? And we didn't see it with 5G really,
Right.
At least not at the scale and the duration that many expected. Gen AI is going to be the same thing. It's going to just be a slow burn. Consumers, on average, they replace their phones every 3.5 years or so. 3 years in the rich world, 5 years in the developing world. So, pick your middle ground. But as consumers upgrade their device, their new device, if it's high enough tier, they'll get Gen AI. So it's kind of going to be organic growth.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll be, maybe we'll see what you just described. They'll be exposed to Gen AI in the workplace and suddenly think, gosh, that would be really nifty to have on my mobile. Perhaps that'll be the case. It'll be something, kind of a different way of driving these trends. One of the things analysts have always been asked to do is predict what is the next killer app that's been going on for 20 years.
Right. It's not something that can just be done magically.
We knew we wouldn't be sitting here, would we?
I know. I'd just invest and I'd be living in a mansion on the Med. But
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet. We do have some ideas. We can point to what consumers want, and we have today. We want it to be really useful. We want Gen AI to work across devices.
So your smart house, your smartphone, your laptop, consolidated apps.
We want it to be secure. We want all-day battery life. If all of this can be provided, also make it for free. But if all of that can be provided, then consumers are going to accept it. But in the meantime, I don't see it. I don't see a super cycle driven by Gen AI in mobile.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think it's interesting too. It's possible that you could have some consumer use cases on mobile for generative AI that people then say, wait, why don't I have this on my PC? Oh, I do have it. I can actually buy it. Oh, okay, I'll go buy that now. Like I do think that there's, because this technology exists in both worlds, right? You have, I think 4G and 5G is a really interesting comparison because obviously that's just how phones work, and that's
right.
A lot of times they're connected to the internet, and that doesn't really carry over to the PC world because you only really need all day connectivity in certain situations or certain use cases or personas. But AI could be different where there is a lot more crossover between the two segments.
Yeah. Sounds like a watch this space.
Yeah.
We'll have to reprise this conversation in a year, and I would imagine that it's going to be dramatically different.
I mean, all-day battery life is an example of that, where people say, why can't I use my computer as long as I use my phone without a charge?
Yeah.
My tablet lasts all day, so why doesn't my laptop?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why you see that being a big, a key value proposition for buying this new crop of AI PCs is not necessarily the AI, but maybe it's the battery life.
Yeah. Interesting. Go for Gen AI just to get a better battery.
All it's talking.
Frank, are there any other questions?
No, I think this brings it to a good conclusion for this chat in particular. I'm sure we'll have more to discuss about generative AI in general, but just want to check, do either of you have anything else to say?
Eric, I'll give the last word to you.
No, I think this was a great chat. I'd love to do it again. Sure we will. But yeah, thanks for hosting, Frank, and thanks for being a good chatting partner, Ken. It's always a good time.
Same. Good to chat once again with you, Eric, and Frank. Thanks for the invitation.
No, well then, thank you both very much for this. That wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Original recording was done on October 17th, 2024, as part of the On-Device Generative AI and Market Disruption webinar. We'd like to thank both Eric Smith and Ken Hires for sharing their time, expertise, and passion on this subject. And remember, the insights don't end here. For more updates, discussions, and behind-the-scenes moments, be sure to connect with us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone you know would be interested. And of course, more details are always available on our website at techinsights.com. We'll catch you next time with more observations and insights, where every listen brings us closer to the stories that matter. Until then, stay curious, stay connected, and stay insightful.